evangelicals, a bedrock of his 2016 rise through the primaries into the presidency, appears to be fraying. On Monday, he spoke in a conservative broadcast, lashed out at evangelical leaders for not already endorsing his latest bid for the White House.
That's a sign of disloyalty. There's great disloyalty in the world of politics, and that's a sign of disloyalty because nobody, as you know, and you would know better than anybody because you do such a great job, nobody has ever done more for right to life than Donald Trump.
During that same interview, he also appeared to deflect the blame that he and his handpicked candidates received for Republicans' underwhelming performance in the midterm, saying that evangelicals could have, quote, fought much harder. Joined now by our chief correspondent and CNN This Morning co-anchor, Caitlin Collins, and our chief national affairs analyst, Casey Hunt. What do you think of this? First of all, does it make sense that he would go on records kind of criticizing evangelicals for not being loyal enough?
It seems almost natural that it's an instinct of his if someone brings up, well, so-and-so hasn't endorsed you that, or so-and-so has criticized you, that is kind of his, automatic response. It's kind of a reaction for him. But for this, though, it's so notable because that was such a key block for him in 2016. They helped him also in 2020. Evangelical voters helped put Trump in the White House. And so I was talking to several of his former advisors about this, and they were saying they just view it as kind of self-defeating. And they're not totally surprised by it because it comes as he is having these broader fears about what the 2024 field is going to look like. He doesn't like the idea that anyone is challenging him, but to hear him go after them, and also to say that they didn't fight hard enough in the 2022 midterm election, saying that basically once the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade, which is obviously something that motivated them to go to the polls for so long, people that I was speaking to, they were just saying it's self-defeating for him to go after that group that helped him so much after the one win, which is why they said they put him in the White House to appoint conservative judges.
Casey, he did deliver for evangelical voters, whether he truly believed in what he was doing or not. He did deliver what he had said he would, which many other politicians, Republicans, had promised to evangelical voters over the years in presidential races and not actually delivered on. But it was always sort of a marriage of convenience. When you have Mike Pence running for president, it's obvious that why a lot of evangelicals, if he could win, would probably prefer him.
Yeah, and Anderson, forgive me, I lost you there for a second, so I may not have gotten your full question, but I was listening to what Caitlin was saying earlier, and I think the reality here is that politics is not the mob, right? It's not all about loyalty, it's about winning. And evangelical leaders in particular saw that Trump lost the 2020 election, and now they have other choices, and none of them want to get on board with a losing train before they actually see, what their options are here. So I think that helps kind of explain the actions of a lot of these leaders. And, Caitlin's right. this was an important block for Trump. It's an important block for any conservative candidate. He worked really hard putting out a letter saying, I'll nominate these judges if you elect me. He did a lot of things to make sure that he had trust from that group. But the reality is that, I think that trust was broken when he lost. And they know that it's unlikely that he potentially is going to win the White House again, or that he could potentially be the toughest horse to get behind here.
Caitlin, I interviewed Bart Barber, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, a while back for a 60 Minutes profile. And he's a very earnest, straightforward guy, not a mega church pastor, head of now the largest evangelical organization. He clearly has said that he would back Pence in a primary. He would have no problem. And, obviously in a general, he was saying, well, let's see who the other candidates are. But the fact that to Casey's point, the fact there are other Republicans in the race whose morality not only support the same policies that Trump supported, but whose morality is not as questionable as Trump's, it's understandable why some evangelical leaders would be hoping that those would rise.
If a Tim Scott gets in the race, you could see who their preferred candidate would be. Obviously not the guy who said, 2 Corinthians was one of his favorite books of the Bible.
Or he's never asked for forgiveness.
Or that he's never asked for forgiveness. You're right. It is a marriage of convenience in the sense that they knew that he would do what they wanted, which is appoint conservative judges to the Supreme Court who would overturn Roe versus Wade. There's another whole fascinating layer to that, given Trump's feud with Mitch McConnell over this, and Mitch McConnell was the one who was a key person in that. But I think that it's clear that is why they're looking at it this way. And it's not just that pastor as well, but look at John Robinson, who said, he was critical of Trump in the fall, saying that he was kind of like an elementary school kid, that he would try to give him this advice and tell him to stop tweeting, stop talking and shooting from the hip, and he would continue to do so. You've seen Robert Jeffress, who said, I'm going to support whoever the nominee is. He'll support Trump if he's the nominee, but making clear he doesn't think he'll necessarily get involved. And others are making a play for that. Ron DeSantis' campaign ad, where they were saying God needed a fighter, a protector, and so essentially he made Ron DeSantis. They are going for that group.
Right. And Casey, Mike Pence has a book tour based in evangelical churches around the country.
Yeah, he sure does. And he's, a very natural candidate for this group. This has been kind of his rock solid block for his entire political career. Now, that said, I think there are a lot of questions across the board about, what Pence's constituency is, considering where he stands with Donald Trump. And, one question I have, we're talking a lot about evangelical leaders. There have been, leaders who have found that their flock doesn't necessarily follow them on things like this. And, I'd be interested to see if many of these congregations don't still harbor a lot of people that actually support Donald Trump, and the leaders might find that they're under pressure from them. I think it's going to be my question as we head into the campaign season.
I talked to some Trump advisors about this after this happened, because that was a key block that helped deliver the White House to Trump. He promised to appoint conservative judges. That's what they wanted. They said they believe this is just a self-defeating issue for Trump.
Yeah, this is an own goal, but I think he blurted out what he really believes. Remember, loyalty with Donald Trump is famously a one-way street. But to your point, a higher percent of evangelicals, white evangelicals, we should say, voted for Donald Trump than voted for George W. Bush, who's actually a born-again Christian. So for him to basically lash out at the evangelical leaders who are pumping the brakes on a Trump 2024 and say they're being disloyal, what does he think they are? His pets that they can be called to heel? Already we got a problem in this country, frankly, when we're dealing with the problem of polarization, about the polarization of religious faith. That's something that's dangerous for democratic republics to break down around partisan lines. And this sort of insult to that community and say they got to fall in line when he runs, just reminds us of the importance of, frankly, keeping religious faith separate from partisan politics. Donald Trump hanging a lantern on that problem.
But are we shocked he didn't do the same thing with Jewish Americans?
He did the same thing with Jewish Americans, in effect.
Question their loyalty.
Question their loyalty, because again, it's all in that Trump-centric universe. It's all about what's good for Donald Trump, and not actually, the essence of evangelism is reaching out and winning converts.
It seemed to be kind of an excuse for 2022 and how Republicans did so poorly in the midterms, because he was saying because of Roe versus Wade, he said they didn't come out as much, he believes, in the midterms after it was already overturned.
Well, yeah, and look, religion and politics is complicated, and he's in the past blamed the overturning of Roe v. Wade for the performance in 2022, now saying he wants credit for it. In 2020, I interviewed a series of religious leaders about just the choices, Biden being a person of faith, and was reminded that the Bible warns against the sin of lying over 116 times. So it seems to me that those are factors that should put in place as well in the totality. But bottom line, one of the things we got to do is break down this polarization of faith in American politics. This common stuff
He needs to get out more.
There's that too.
Yeah.